Hello to all the wonderful viewers watching the channel today. We're stepping into an episode that just by hearing it might make your heart ache for a moment and then warm right back up. Because right at the moment when fate seemed determined to take everything away from Tiêunu and little Diêp, when the violent flash flood swallowed their small home in just a few minutes, when Tiêunu stood in the mud-soaked clearing, trembling from head to toe, clinging to her child with no idea what tomorrow would look like, a figure appeared from afar. A silhouette so familiar her knees nearly gave out. The person she waited for waited until she was exhausted by hope. The person she thought might never return to this life again. Truong, not a dream, not a hallucination. It was Truong, real alive, standing right in front of her. And what shocked everyone even more, he had remembered everything. Right there on the land that once held their home, now reduced to broken wood and soft mud. Truong dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around Tiêunu and little Diêp as if he feared losing them one more time. His voice broke, but every word rang clear, so clear that even the onlookers felt chills run down their spine. I'm home, and I will rebuild this house with my own hands. In that moment, their story stopped being about loss. It became the journey of a man returning from the edge of the storm to repair memories, to make amends with the woman he loves, and to give his son a real home. And if you're curious to know, how did Truong regain all his memories? What did he go through during the months he disappeared? And what does the new house, standing bright in the fields after the flood, truly mean for the three of them? Come with me as we open the door to today's story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because from this moment on, every twist and turn is only just beginning. The rain had begun the afternoon before. At first, it was just a few stray droplets, so light it felt like nothing more than the wind playing tricks. But then the sky dimmed, layer after layer of heavy black clouds rolled in like a massive hand pressing down on the once peaceful countryside. By midnight, it was no longer rain. It was a furious drumbeat pounding against the old tiled roof. Water in the fields, in the canals, on every dirt path, rose inch by inch, then suddenly merged into one swirling muddy sheet. By the second day, water from the upstream burst down. No warning, no sign. Just a massive surge, thick brown, raging as if it intended to swallow everything, the ground, the rooftops, even the trembling breaths of the villagers. Inside the small riverside house, Tiêunu's hands trembled so much she didn't even realize she was dropping things. She shoved Diêp's clothes into a thin plastic bag, while the little boy clung to his frayed teddy bear, eyes wide and confused. "Mom, why is the water so high?" "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." But her chest tightened every time she glanced out the window. The water had reached the doorstep. The wind outside howled like it wanted to tear the world apart. The wooden door rattled violently, and a loose metal sheet in the yard slammed against a post with a sharp metallic crack, making Diêp jump and bury himself deeper into her arms. Around 4 a.m. on the third day, when the sky was so black that morning felt like a lie, the village loudspeaker blared, "Evacuate immediately, water level." Rising fast. No more hesitation. No time for regret. Tiêunu lifted Diêp into her arms, grab the nearly weightless plastic bag, light like a future just emptied out. The moment she opened the door, icy water rushed over her ankles, numbing her skin. "Mom, I'm scared. Hold Mommy tight. Don't let go." Her voice was shaking so badly, she could hear her own terror in it. The riverside road had turned into a torrent. Flashlights from neighbors' houses flickered like lost fireflies, desperately searching for a path to safety. Voices shouting names, children crying, objects smashing and drifting, everything blended into a chaotic storm of sound that made hearts clench. Tieu pushed forward against the current, hammering at her legs. She slipped several times, tree roots scraping her skin raw. But each time she saw the small face buried in her chest, she stood back up and forced herself onward, not daring to stop for even a second. A man sprinted past, shouting, his voice cracked with fear. The upstream dam overflowed. "Run now, or it's too late." The sentence shattered the last bit of calm she had left. She bolted toward the dirt road leading to higher ground, arms wrapped around Dewey so tightly her knuckles turned white. Behind her, water surged into every home. Lights across the village flickered, then died one by one, like breaths being stolen by the flood. By morning, the water finally receded. But what remained was not peace. It was a wasteland, as if someone had erased the entire village with one brutal sweep. Tieu carried Dewey back to the riverside. She tried to prepare herself, tried to remind herself that what's lost is lost. But when she stood before the land, her knees buckled, the home where she carried Dewey in her womb, where the two of them survived their hardest years together, where a warm yellow light once glowed through the window every night, was now nothing but wet, collapsing earth. Uprooted wooden pillars lay scattered. A few broken planks drifted into the bamboo grove. And the front door frame, the one she cleaned every morning, was now twisted like a leaf torn by a storm. Dewey tugged at her sleeve, his voice soft as breath. "Mom, where's our house?" Tieu pressed her lips together. She didn't cry. Not because she was strong, but because she knew if she shed even one tear, her son would be terrified forever. "Our house, the wind carried it away, sweetheart." She forced a smile, crooked, fragile, painful even to look at. The wind blew through, carrying the smell of mud, silt, and the ruin of a life swept away. Tieu lowered her forehead onto Dewey's head and whispered, "It's okay. I'll take care of you, I promise. We'll be okay." She said it, even though her heart felt hollow like an empty sky after the storm. She didn't know where to go, didn't know how to start again, didn't know what future to reach for when the only home she had was gone. Only one thing remained, one thing the flood could not take. Dewey was still in her arms, and for him, she had to stay standing. The wind blew again, softer this time, like someone whispering, "Be strong." But Tieu had no idea. Far away, at a crossroads, where the road split into three, a man stood, frozen, heart-pounding, as memories crashed back like a waterfall. Truong, whom she believed lost forever, was remembering everything, and he was about to witness this moment, the moment mother and child lost everything. The wind swept across the bare open ground, carrying with it a sharp, icy dampness. The rain had just stopped, yet the air still felt heavy, as if another storm was waiting somewhere above, refusing to leave. Tieu stood frozen, on the muddy earth, her pants stained with dirt, her hair clinging to her face with rain and soil. She held Dewey tightly in her arms, clinging to the only thing the flood hadn't taken away. Silence stretched until it became suffocating, and then a sound. A single soft footstep, so light yet enough to make the mud ahead of her sink in just slightly. Lytieunu lifted her head. A figure was approaching. Slowly. Very slowly. As if he too was afraid that this scene was only a dream, something that would vanish the moment he touched it. His white shirt was smeared with dried mud, torn in places. His face looked hollowed cheeks, thinner hair, disheveled like someone who hadn't slept in days. But his eyes, those eyes that once sparkled every time they looked at her and her child, were bright again. Steady again. As if his lost memories had finally returned home. Lytieunu saw it clearly. It was Truong, in the flesh. And he was looking at her as if she were the most precious thing in his life. She didn't react, didn't breathe. Her whole body felt carved out of stone. Diêp clung to her neck, staring at the man for a long moment. His little eyelids blinked rapidly. Then suddenly he screamed a sharp, ringing cry that cut through the thick, humid air. "Dad." The word pierced the silence like an arrow. Truong stopped short, his eyes flooding instantly. He pressed a trembling hand over his mouth, as if trying to hold together whatever was breaking inside him. Then he rushed toward them, not running but moving fast, unsteady, almost desperate. The kind of desperation only someone who had survived death, survived the emptiness of lost memory, could understand. Someone who had finally found the reason to keep living. He dropped to his knees in the mud. Diêp leapt into his arms. Truong wrapped his son in a tight embrace, his hands shaking as they closed around the small back, pulling the child to his chest. He inhaled deeply, like breathing him back into existence. "Dad, you came back. Dad, I'm here. I'm right here, son." Truong's voice cracked, breaking completely. Lytieunu stood only a few steps away, yet she felt as though her soul had stepped outside of her body. She didn't dare believe it, didn't dare trust that the man before her was real. Truong released. Diêp rose slowly and looked at her. That look, it nearly made her knees buckle. In his eyes were pain, love, regret, and memory. Complete, unbroken memory. Truong stepped closer cautiously, as if afraid she might retreat. But she didn't. She stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding so fiercely it felt like it might burst. He reached out and placed his hand on her shoulder, a touch so light the wind could have carried it away, yet powerful enough to make tears explode in her chest, even if she held them back. Truong gently pulled her into his arms. It wasn't like the embraces of the past, warm, natural, full of life. This one was the embrace of a man who had lost everything, died, once wandered in darkness, and finally found the place where he belonged. He held her tightly, one hand at the back of her neck, his face buried in her shoulder, as if trying to carve the memory of her into his bones. Diêp wrapped his arms around both of them, resting his head against his mother's stomach, breathing deeply. In that moment, the three of them touched something miraculous, something no one would dare believe unless they saw it. The wind brushed past them, bringing the scent of river silt and wet earth. A thin ray of sunlight pierced through the gray clouds, making the droplets on their hair glisten. After a long moment, gathering every ounce of courage she had left. Lytieunu whispered, "You remembered everything." Her voice trembled more like a prayer than a question. Truong didn't answer right away. He pulled back slightly, lifting her face gently so he could look directly into her eyes. He nodded, softly, slowly, but with a certainty that made her heart clench. And the moment he nodded, 2 tears slid down his cheeks, falling onto Lytieunus's shoulder. She heard him whisper, voice fractured, "I remember you. Remember Diêp. Remember everything." Lytieunu lifted her hand to his face, needing to know this wasn't an illusion. "You really, really. I remember it all. I remember our home, our last dinner. I remember the night I was ambushed. I remember the very last second before I lost my memory." Diêp looked up, his voice soft and quivering. "Dad, don't go away again, okay?" Truong knelt, pulling his son to his chest, tears falling onto the boy's soft hair. "I won't go anywhere. I'm staying. I'm staying with you both. Forever." Lytieunu broke down completely. She couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears streamed down her face, soaking the mud-stained fabric. But now she didn't care. No fear. No pretending to be strong. All she knew was he had come back, and so had his memories. Truong cupped her face, wiping her tears gently, as if afraid to hurt her. "I'm sorry for everything you and our son had to endure, but I'm here now, and I won't let anyone lay a hand on either of you ever again." The wind quieted. The 3 of them stood amid the ruins, but in that moment, they no longer saw the destruction. They saw only each other, and right there on the very ground where their home had been swept away, a family was rebuilt, not with bricks or wood, but with breath, with tears, with memories returned, and with the promise of a man who had already died. Once night fell slowly, as if it too were exhausted after 3 days of storm and rain. The entire countryside sank into a dark, damp heaviness, with only a few weak beams of flashlight flickering from makeshift shelters. Lytieunu, Truong, and Diêp sat beneath a neighbor's tarp-covered porch. Cold wind slipped through every gap in their clothing, carrying the smell of mud and lingering silt left behind by the flood. A small fire crackled before them, made from a few dry branches the neighbor had gathered. The flames wavered, not warm enough, but bright enough to reveal the 3 faces still wet from rain and from tears that hadn't been wiped away. Diêp sat in the middle, his head resting on his father's shoulder, one tiny hand gripping his mother's. He was exhausted, yet kept forcing his eyes open, afraid that if he slept for even a moment, his father might disappear again just like before. Truong pulled off his thin jacket and draped it over both mother and child. The firelight flickered across his face, hollow-worn, but carrying something new clarity. Return. He stared into the flames for a long time. The trembling fire in the wind looked like his own heart, fighting to steady itself after days of wandering in darkness. Then Truong reached out and gently took Lytieunus's hand. His hand was rough, scraped like it had passed through thorns. Hers was slender, ice cold. Their hands hadn't touched for a long time, and when they finally did, both shivered as if touching a memory that had been stolen away. Truong spoke, voice hoarse but steady. "I owe you so much." Lytieunu stiffened. She didn't dare lift her head. She was afraid that looking into his eyes would make her cry like a child. He continued each word, rising from the emptiness he had wandered through. I owe our son a home, a proper life, and I owe you a promise I never got the chance to keep. Tiêunu bit her lip chest, tightening. The fire flared slightly, as if it too sensed something important was being said. I'll rebuild it. Truong's voice was slow, firm, right there. On that land, the place where you and our son waited for me. Dewey tilted his head, eyes shining. A new house, Dad. Truong leaned down and smiled. A weak smile, but warm like the first sunlight of early summer. Yes, a new house. Bigger, prettier, and safer. He emphasized the last word, because in the memories that had just returned, the near death, the injury, the nights of faint footsteps in the dark, he understood exactly what danger meant. Tiêunu clutched the hem of her shirt, her voice trembling. Truong, don't say things someone like me doesn't dare dream of. He turned to her, raising her chin gently so she would meet his eyes. The firelight reflected in Truong's gaze, eyes that were no longer dull, no longer lost. They were bright, deep, steady with the resolve of a man who had just found his family again and found himself. I'm not making empty promises. His voice dropped firm like a beam newly set in place. You and our son are the reason I'm alive. Now that my memory is back, I'll do everything to protect you both. Tiêunu couldn't hold it anymore. Tears spilled onto his hand. Dewey looked up softly. So, Dad is staying with us forever. Truong pulled him close, wrapping both mother and child in his arms. I'm staying. I'm home. And I'm not going anywhere again. The wind passed by more gently than before. The little flame before them leaned in their direction as if bowing in acknowledgement of that promise. In the cold darkness on the ground that had just witnessed loss, the three of them held each other tightly, as if rebuilding a home with nothing but their own arms. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, and while dew still clung to the blades of grass along the riverbank, Truong was already standing on the empty plot of land, the place where their old home used to be. The mud was still wet, the ground still soft and sinking, but his eyes were sharp and firm like a blade freshly honed. He waited for no one. Not for government aid, not for the earth to dry, not for rest after the exhausting night. He started working, silently, steadily, with the determination of someone who had truly come home. When Tiêunu woke up and stepped out from under the neighbor's tarp, she saw Truong carrying bags of cement. His shoulders were already soaked with sweat, even though the morning air was still cool. The sunlight filtered through the dust, settling on his back like tiny specks of gold. She called out softly, Truong, eat something first before you start. He turned around, breathing hard, but offered her a gentle smile. I'm fine. You and our son rest. Let me take care of this. Then Truong went right back to work. His hands covered in scrapes lifted each brick and stacked them neatly in rows. He measured each wooden post 3 times to be precise, then drove it into the ground with the care of someone placing a promise. Dewey ran around, excitedly, his little sandals caked with mud. Dad, Dad, When will our house be done? I want my new room. Truong ruffled the boy's hair, smiling, even as sweat trickled into his eyes. Soon. Dad will build as fast as he can, so you have a place to sleep. Dewey nodded enthusiastically, thrilled, as if he'd just been given a present. Villagers began to gather around. Some brought hoes. Some carried hammers. Some stood at a distance with their arms crossed, their eyes softening with emotion. An older man lit a cigarette and remarked, "Yeah, the old Truong has finally come back." An elderly woman nodded, hands on her hips. I knew it the moment I saw his posture. That boy loves his wife and kid deeply. He just needed to remember. A few young men rushed over. "Let us help, brother. Do you need this area?" "Dug out, Truong. We'll mix the cement for you." Truong looked up, surprised for a moment, then smiled gratefully. He didn't push anyone away, didn't refuse their help, but he still handled the heaviest parts. His back bent as he carried whole bundles of bamboo poles. The veins on his arms stood out with every swing of the hammer. His steady, hammering thud, 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 echoed like a declaration that he had returned whole and true. By noon, the sun was high. Its heat beat down on the still wet mud, making the ground steam with heavy warmth. From afar, Lytieunu watched him work her heart, both aching and anxious. She brought him a bottle of water, but had to call his name 3 times. He was too focused on measuring the spacing between the posts. When she handed him the bottle, their fingers brushed lightly. A small, fleeting touch, yet both froze. Truong looked at her, voice low and rough. "Our home. I want to build it with my own hands. Every brick needs to be solid, so you and our son won't ever be afraid again." Lytieunu lowered her head, hiding her reddening eyes. "You don't have to. I do." His voice was firm but gentle. "I've missed too much already." The afternoon passed. The harsh sunlight softened. Dewey fell asleep on the tarp after playing all day. Lytieunu sat beside him, occasionally adjusting the cloth hat shading his face. Truong was still working on the last post of the frame. The sunset cast a warm orange glow over him, turning his silhouette quiet and golden. A neighbor sighed softly to another. "The house isn't complete yet, but that frame, that heart, is the strongest part already." When Truong hammered in the final nail of the day, he straightened up, wiped the sweat from his face, and looked toward Lytieunu. She was looking at him too. A long look, peaceful and full of gratitude. The roof wasn't built yet, but the family had already been rebuilt. That afternoon, a cool breeze rose from the riverside, carrying with it the familiar scent of silt. The late-day sunlight spread across the newly dried ground, reflecting off the fresh red roof tiles that still held the fragrance of new timber. The new home of Truong, Lytieunu, and Dewey stood bathed in the golden glow of sunset, a warm patch of color in a countryside still recovering from the storm. The bright red roof tiles, neatly aligned, glimmered under the fading sun, as if exhaling after days of rain. The foundation had been raised nearly 1/2 meter, sturdy, clean, no longer threatened by unexpected floods. A wide porch, brick-paved steps, a place where Lytieunu could dry clothes, sun blankets, or simply sit with a cup of tea while watching Dewey run around. The dark wooden door, carved by Truong himself, bore simple yet elegant patterns. Beside it was a small room, not luxurious, but full of light, a space he had made just for Diêp. Inside, boxes of crayons lay open. On the wall were scribbled drawings, clumsy curves, a smiling sun, and one messy picture of 3 figures holding hands. Diêp called it my dream room. At the housewarming that afternoon, neighbors came to congratulate them. One brought a pot of kumquats, another a bunch of wildflowers, another a handful of fragrant rice. Laughter drifted through the new windows, but as the crowd thinned, only the 3 of them remained standing at the doorstep. Truong turned and took Tieunu's hand. His hand was still rough from days of lifting bricks and setting beams, but the way he held her was unbelievably gentle. Tieu lowered her gaze shyly, but Truong lifted her hand and placed it in his own palm. Diêp stood beside them, eyes wide with excitement. Truong took a deep breath, as if gathering every emotion of the past days into this single moment. He pushed the door open. It swung softly, no creaking like the old house, only the clean, fresh scent of new wood drifting out. The evening light spilled across the wooden floor, bathing all 3 of them in gold. Truong squeezed Tieunu's hand, his voice deep and warm. "Your home. Our son's home. Our home." Such simple words, yet they sent a cold, emotional shiver down Tieunu's spine. Tears fell onto the new brick threshold before she could stop them. She covered her mouth, crying and laughing, at the same time, the kind of laugh that appears only when the pain has been too great and the happiness too overwhelming. Diêp looked from his mother to his father, not understanding everything, but feeling the joy filling the new house. He ran forward and threw his arms around his father's neck, laughing so hard his little shoulders shook. "Dad, the house is so pretty. It's ours now, right?" "Dad," Truong bent down and embraced both his son and Tieu, the scent of new wood, the faint fragrance of Tieunu's hair, the warm skin of Diêp pressed against him, and the unmistakable smell of a home rebuilt from things once thought lost. Outside, the evening breeze passed through the newly built porch, carrying the soft rustle of leaves like a blessing. No one said another word. They simply stood there, the 3 of them holding each other inside a house still fragrant with the beginning of a new chapter. A house had been rebuilt, a family had been revived, and a new life was opening before them. The first night in the new house arrived gently, like a long exhale after days of storm and chaos. A cool breeze drifted in from the fields, slipping through the wooden slats, still smelling of fresh timber, creating a soft rustling sound, just enough to remind them that life was returning. Inside, the warm, yellow glow of an oil lamp hung on the wall, casting moving bands of light across the wooden floor as the wind breathed outside. Tieu lay on the left, Diêp in the middle, and Truong on the right, exactly the place he once belonged, the place he had lost and now found again. He was home, whole, complete, held between 2 sources of warmth he once feared he would never touch again. Truong lay still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The dark, wooden ceiling boards he had hammered in himself, one by one, measuring each gap with his own hands. Every time he looked up at it, memories returned, the weight of the hammer, the sweat running down his neck, and Diêp's bright eyes asking, "Dad, does that mean I get my new room tomorrow. The sound of the wind outside blended with Dui's steady breathing, filling the room with a peace so deep it felt unreal. Truong gently held his son's hand. That tiny hand curled around his finger tight and sure like a promise, a confirmation, a wordless vow. In the soft darkness, he whispered, "Thank heavens for letting me come back." His voice was rough, like kitchen smoke, but every word was full of gratitude. Gratitude for surviving. Gratitude for remembering. Gratitude for being here under the same roof between the two people he loved more than his own life. Lytieunu shifted slightly. The oil lamp cast a faint golden line across her cheek, delicate like the strokes of Dui's drawings on the wall next door. She placed her hand on his chest, right over the heart beating hard from emotion. Her palm was warm, soft. But to Truong, it felt like the world had just been placed on him, a world so gentle he once failed to cherish it. Her voice was barely above a whisper, trembling not from fear, but from emotion. What matters is, you're here, just that. But the sentence flowed into Truong's veins. He turned his face toward her. In the light, Tieunu's eyes shimmered, holding traces of fear from the days of loss and the fragile joy of finally finding peace again. Truong reached out and brushed her hair softly. "I'll always be here." Dui shifted, still asleep, but his little arms reached out instinctively, wrapping around both parents. His head pressed against Truong's chest, warm breaths, brushing the cold skin of his father. Truong chuckled quietly, a sound of happiness caught in his throat. Even in sleep, Dui held on to him, as if afraid that letting go would make his father vanish again into those shadowy, uncertain days. Truong bent down and kissed his son's forehead. "Daddy's here. Go to sleep, little one." Outside the window, the post-flood fields still held scattered pools of water, like pieces of broken mirrors. A thin moon hung above its reflection, stretching across the water, like a pathway leading toward their future. In that wooden house, smelling of new beginnings, there were no more sounds of fear, no more tears, no more shattered dreams. There was only a new home, a new family, and a new life, beginning its first quiet heartbeat under the moonlight after the storm. And my dear friends, as we watch the three of them lying together on their very first night in the new home, peaceful, warm, whole, I believe anyone watching can feel one truth. Sometimes happiness isn't about having more, it's about finding back what you once thought was lost. But what do you think? If you were Tieuunu, after everything she's been through, would you have enough trust left to open your heart again? If you were Truong, would you dare to live differently from this day on, cherishing every moment with the ones you love? And tell me, do you think the storms in their lives have truly ended? Leave a comment below. Just one sentence is enough so I know whose side your heart is on in this very moment. We'll see each other in the next episode. And I promise you, everything is only just beginning.